they're very critical of outside groups. They call us the cows, California, Oregon, and Washington, trying to tell them what to do in Alaska. And so that's why it was really important for us to partner with local groups and hire a local lobbyist. So this is kind of his language, keeping the character of the valley. That really resonates with people. Instead of calling it natural capital or natural assets, they prefer community assets. That resonated better with the locals there. And just to show you, so Anchorage is down there. It's not part of the Mat-Su borough, but the next biggest city is Wasilla, Palmer, and Talkeetna. It's not listed. Oh yes, Talkeetna is there. And you have to go through Talkeetna to get to Denali. No, there. So a lot of tourists go through the Mat-Su if they want to go to the various parks. And they have healthy salmon populations there. The discussion isn't really about restoration. It's about conservation and protection of natural assets. And other services we looked at were recreational opportunities there. And, yeah, I'm not big on transitions, so you can tell these are their slides. The next is agricultural again. So I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of massive pumpkins and squash. You'll see a lot of those in the Mat-Su because they get a lot of daylight in the summertime because they're further north. And affordable housing and large lot sizes, that's really important to them. Again, we picked these pictures because I'm not really keen on having a house right next to the water and kind of replacing and repairing areas there, but they do like their space. And they do have a sense of history. A lot of people from the Midwest transitioned to move to the Mat-Su, and I actually met a couple people who were homesteaders there. They were one of the first to live on that land. That was incredible. And in short, it's spectacular. It's a great place to work, and they are now, we just finished the analysis of identifying, valuing their community assets, ecosystem services. And now we're moving on to the next phase of looking for funding mechanisms for their parks, for their agriculture, and for their open space, because what we don't want in terms of the Mat-Su 2050 team is to have the Mat-Su Valley turn into an LA, the next LA or Austin. We want to make sure that they have smart growth. And it is the fastest growing borough. They don't have counties there, they have boroughs. It is the fastest growing borough in Alaska. And a lot of people notice those changes. And they're expecting it to reach 300,000 in the next 1,600 years, which is a lot of people for them. Yes.
Do you know what's driving the
more people? I think some of it is people are immigrating from other countries, but also a lot of people work in Anchorage, and because the Mat-Su is so close to Anchorage, people just drive to Anchorage, work there, drive to the Mat-Su to go play and work. Yeah. And these were the 36 billion that I mentioned earlier. That was the average of the range, and that's something that one of my coworkers will talk about is that we provide ranges, not an exact value, because this is not a perfect science. We are collecting. There's still a lot more to learn from, and so we pick the lowest of the value and the highest value to provide a range, and we feel that that's harder to argue against. So that deals with uncertainty. Yeah, a lot more than zero. And if you want to read that report, again, it shows the top 3 land cover types. Basically, we look at the various ecosystem services that I mentioned. Each of those can fall into various land cover types, and they all have their own values. So that's part of what makes these different. And then these are averages. But again, wetlands are highly important, and I think this is a great message to get through, because a lot of people value salmon. They know salmon is important for their economy, for their livelihoods, but they don't think wetlands are that important. Well, salmon need wetlands, so they need to make that connection, and I think that this ecosystem services framework can help with messaging. And there's a report. You can any of our reports on our website, but I think Lola's going to have
Yeah,
send you
your
a couple
assigned readings.
reports. Yeah. This is just one of them. This is the latest one that I worked on. Yeah, so that's it. Any questions?
So you mentioned social capital and human capital. What do you see as a difference?
I would say human capital is more your knowledge, your skills. So whether a person knows A, B, C, or C++ versus, that would be human capital, versus social capital, it's the bonds, the connections that you have with various people.
Community.
Community, exactly.
So individual versus social.
So you're talking about the problem of having legitimacy in a place like Alaska. You don't want to be called a cow, California, Oregon, Washington. But I was wondering, like, in places that you operate, like Ecuador, what kind of resistance have you run into from local and indigenous groups being like, who are you to come in and tell us what we can and cannot extract from our local environment, whether it be like, logging, bushmeat, whatever, and that people are like unsustainably extracting from their local environment.
Great question. So, well, first off, we don't just go into any place and value things without getting the local stakeholders involved. So, thankfully, we haven't run into that situation where someone says, why are you here valuing our areas? But I get what you're saying. There's that criticism that the extractive, only the extractive piece is important and not the other ecosystems. Is that, or what the type of critiques?
Well, more that people will value their own, their own subsistence, their own economic activities, and they'll say, well, I support my family selling selling the wood that I chop in the forest, or I support my family selling the bush meat that I went out and hunted myself.
Sure.
And that's their value.
That's their value. And I think we would say we try to incorporate that value as well. It's not ignoring the extractive industry either, even though it might be at a subsistence scale. It's more scale, that doesn't mean it's any less. But that's where we can get into conversations about looking at what's best for the community. So Costa Rica is a good example for a payment for ecosystem service. Now, this example that I'm going to provide is not like a silver bullet, and none of these are silver bullet examples, but one system was they would pay, people in the city would pay farmers up in the watershed to not cut down their trees for timber to burn for their food, so that they can get clean water. So the system, the funding mechanism was that the payment for ecosystem service, the beneficiaries in the city paid the farmers not to do work. Now, that actually worked out. In some cases, it's not ideal because then you're kind of shifting the knowledge, I guess, and know-how of a certain industry. So there's pros and cons to everything, but I think it's just, we try to work with, we try to listen to all the concerns. We try to incorporate as many values as we can. And yeah, I think the critiques, I guess I can kind of shift to that, is we do get critiques from both sides. On one side is, nature is priceless, especially you could get this from indigenous groups. Why would you even think about putting a dollar value to nature? And I guess our response to that is, yes, nature, like people, are priceless, but some people have jobs and they're getting paid for it, so that's one way of valuing what people make. And it's one way of saying that nature's providing services, work for people. That's a very anthropocentric view. We realize that, but it seems to, in terms of messaging, it really does help bring different actors together on the same page. On the other side, so that was one side. It's priceless. The other side is only things that you can extract from the market. That's the only thing that's valuable. That's the other side that you would get. And I think when our response to that is, well, you can actually lower your taxes in one way. You can actually save more money and be more efficient if you look at the economy as a whole, including all these ecosystem services. So here in Washington State, for example, you have people paying a flood district to deal with flood control, but then in the same exact area, you have taxpayers also paying for another program in another area to help salmon, and sometimes those goals are clashing. And so if you have the kind of holistic interdisciplinary vision, including all stakeholders, I think the ecosystem services framework has been a good first step into entering that conversation. But we do get critiques on both sides.
So I guess it seems like there's a lot of components that go into each one of these projects, right? When you're trying to consider all of these different things, you have a valuing system, right? With how many different valuing levels can you bring into it?
Oh, how many methods? Or
Yeah, like you were talking about the valuation methods, and you just went through a couple of them, and it seems like there were a lot more. But how do you kind of have the checks and balances of like which ones you're actually using within, like when you're approaching projects? And I guess also like maybe this sounds like maybe this is going to be a stupid question, but like if you're putting value on a wetland, right? And is it just, it's obviously probably not just the area of that wetland, right? Like each location is going to have a different value to their wetland. So how do you conceptually approach that, I guess?
those are good questions. First one is how do we kind of distinguish which valuation method to use?
Yeah.
So I didn't have the valuation slides. I do have a deck for that, which I know will be used in a couple weeks. But essentially, we have a tool in-house called the Ecosystem Valuation Toolkit, and it's a database basically that houses various valuation studies. So say, I'll just take recreation, for example. There's different ways to value recreation. You can use the market method, you can use contingent valuation, you can use surveys, you can use the travel cost method. What do? We use them all. We don't say one is more important than the other, and that's why you get such a large range. But we're just trying to use the best literature out there. So we go through an extensive process where we review the study, we collect the data, obviously with the author, bibliographic information, information about the site that they looked at, the evaluation method, what components went into